once again to Sports Talk Weekend. I'm Doug Eberhardt at EbHoops. We're talking with Amy Jo Martin, who's at Amy Jo Martin. Twitter, social media is our subject this evening, and Amy was talking about her work with pro athletes, pro teams, etc. And one of the things I wanted to know about, and I think a lot of people in Vancouver want to know about, Amy, is when you started out with Steve Nash, he was the real Nash. Now he's at Steve Nash. How did he embrace your ideas about social media and Twitter, and how did that work back in the beginning?
It was kind of a funny story. You know, I'd been working with Shaquille, who was on the team, and they were actually on a road trip. So Shaquille and I were experimenting as far as concepts to really prove that it was him behind this Twitter account. And so I developed the random acts of Shaqness concept, and this was kind of that surprise and delight where Shaquille would tweet his whereabouts. We call it, hide and tweet now, or Twitter tag. And fans would just come running, and he would literally be there in person to meet them. Well, this had been taking place, and Shaquille and Steve were, I think, on the team plane getting ready to take off one night, and I get this call, and Shaquille's like, here, talk to Steve Nash. He needs to get on Twitter. So I'm talking to Steve and help set him up, get him going, and then we had a conversation later, and he said, I'm not like Shaquille. I have a different personality. I don't know if this is really going to work for me. And we kind of had a heart-to-heart, and Steve is amazing when it comes to his charitable interests as well as just his creativity and interests outside of basketball, too, not to mention the fact that he's probably one of the hardest working athletes I've ever met and extremely disciplined and kind of really an authority when it comes to health and nutrition and physical fitness. So we talked through those things, and he's really just identified his value to his audience, and he gets it. Even the last couple of months, he's been traveling around and sharing his experiences, whether it's soccer-related or NHL or off in Paris recently with some friends, and telling the story. He gets it. He knows what fans want to hear, and he's real. There's no faking it with social media, and I think the numbers prove it. He really embraced video over the last season, and I was trying to constantly get him to just flip that camera around and speak to fans. And there's one video specifically that really, I think, just hit home, and I use it in my keynote speeches right now as an example of best practice. But it was just one night, I think the team had flown into the next city. They were having some challenges just in terms of performance. They were kind of in a rut, and he just flipped the camera around for 30 seconds to a minute and talked to the fans. And he was like, okay, guys, we need your support. And kind of put it back on them. It's like, are you going to stick with us or what? And then he added some comedy in at the end, and it was just perfect Steve Nash, kind of delivering his message. He's done a great job.
A great job, and some of his humorous videos as well. I'm still frightened by Leandro Barbosa from Avatar to this day, which I think was a video that Steve tweeted out. We're talking with Amy Jo Martin. She's her company's Digital Royalty, and one of the things you mentioned as well was the acts of Shaqness, all the stuff you've done with Shaq, and now athletes are using Twitter, and I'll use Shaq as the example here to connect directly to people on big announcements. And Shaq obviously recently retiring, announcing it over Twitter, asking for people to come up with his new and last nickname on Twitter, embedding video, etc. So how do you see that playing out with athletes making big announcements through Twitter?
I see it just happening more and more. That was a big day with Shaquille announcing his retirement via tout first, and Twitter and Facebook before the media even knew about it, before the NBA knew about it. I was with him that day at his home, and it was very counterintuitive to what you would expect for an A-list celebrity athlete like Shaquille ONeal to make that type of an announcement. It was just him and I and a couple of other people. There was no press release and really no media presence. And so he became the media that day. And the reason is because he's worked at it over the last several years. He has more than 6 million friends talk to, and it was important for him to tell his fans first. 19 years I've been with him, and he was able to do it in his own words. So we kept that momentum up and asked the fans to help us out with the new nickname, got the engagement going. It was fun. And the reason it works is because, Shaquille has zero ability to fake anything, and he really, truly enjoys connecting with fans, entertaining. His goal in life is to make people smile. He's told me many times. And he does a great job using social media to convey his messages. ESPN and all the other sports entities reported on it a few minutes later, and he was the media. They were reporting on him. They kind of turned the tables, but it was great. It was, I think, a day that really was able to make a point and make it clear how powerful social media can be for anyone. It's just a communication tool. But first you have to build that influence and that base, which he's done.
And that's interesting because Shaquille ONeal, the humble brag department here, he, a friend of our show and spent a lot of time at the turn of the century in Vancouver rehabbing before the Lakers' 3 victories. We're talking with Amy Jo Martin and a lot about Twitter, a lot about social media. Now, you mentioned how Shaquille became the media for his retirement announcement, and what I wonder about is how has social media kind of changed that the traditional dynamic between the old media, whether it's radio, television, newspapers, and the athlete? How's that dynamic changed now that the athlete can go straight to the fans or straight to their public with the message?
It keeps the traditional media on their toes, and it's because anybody can leapfrog the media now. It's become a situation where the media entities have to really stay as progressive as possible to make sure that they're still valuable. And by no means was this strategy for Shaquille's announcement a play to, frustrate the media or anything like that. In fact, he hosted everybody a couple days later at his home and had a wonderful, event for them and formal press conference.
And I heard delightful food from my media friends.
He did, yes. So that's what's happening now is, the integration and kind of converging of the mediums, traditional and this new progressive digital way of communicating. That's become more important to focus on for media outlets. So it's social TV now is very important. You notice a lot of sports entities that are really bridging and trying to integrate social media into their programming and their format, just as you are today. You mentioned your Twitter handle at the top of this interview, which is something you would have never heard, probably 2 years ago, if not even a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's no longer just follow us on Twitter and become our friend on Facebook. These entities have to explain why. What is it that you are going to offer me? Because everybody, as a consumer, as a fan, I'm getting hit up by everybody, and this space is cluttered. There are over 1 billion people now on Facebook and Twitter, so you really have to stay focused on what your value is and deliver that when, where, and how your audience wants to receive it.
And cutting through that clutter, maybe I'll finish up with this last type of question. The next phase of Twitter, kind of the Twitter 2.0, we'll be looking at, more content-rich material. Will it be to monetize and sell tickets more? Will it be about fans in the arenas and stadiums? I know hashtag battles at some places, or I know the work with the UFC you've done and Dana White and the UFC, the Twitter bounties that have been put out there. What's kind of the next stage in Twitter?
The UFC is a great example, Doug, because I think the next stage, and this is something that the UFC has embraced and got it really early, was social media impacts every aspect of business. Whether you're an individual celebrity or a sports team and league or a corporate brand, it really impacts your, human relations department, your sponsorship, sales, communication, even legal. And there's a lot that can be done with social media to help brands save money, research, customer service, decreasing ad spend. So looking at how this communication tool is truly more like the telephone and less like an advertising TV spot is where the direction should be going, in my opinion. The space wasn't invented for advertisers or promoters necessarily. It was invented to communicate. So really thinking in terms of, what is it that my brand can do to offer more value to the consumers, to the audience, and not think of this as, a marketing vehicle. The technology behind social media, whether it's Twitter or any other platform, is an important aspect, but at Digital Royalty, we tend to be more high concept, high touch, and let the technology complement our strategies and our objectives, because there are so many different platforms that are sprouting up right now, and we hear from all of them. Every week we're getting calls and emails, hey, check this out, I want to meet with you about this new application or new platform. And really it's more about the creative and the strategy and the objective, and then we look at, okay, what will complement that versus letting the technology drive, because that should just be a complement to the solution.
There you go. We all know now what to look for in future investments. Look for the things Amy told us in social media, kids. Now, I guess I'll just end off with maybe take yourself out of the CEO position of Digital Royalty and put yourself kind of in the fan seat. And what are some of your favorite athlete sites, pages, Twitter accounts, etc.? And it doesn't have to be people that you or Digital Royalty are working with. Just maybe a couple that people should go see right this very second as we talk on the radio.
Sure. Well, one of my favorites from the very beginning was Lance Armstrong. He seems to really understand what it is that fans want to see and hear about, and he doesn't come across as bragging or kind of having that type of tonality, but he just gets it. So he would be someone that I find interesting for a different way. I wouldn't say he's the most humorous, entertaining account to follow, but he's very insightful in terms of you get to see and hear and learn about things that you never would have if you weren't following him. And this may sound, I'm a little biased because Dana White is a client, but he really is entertaining even if you aren't necessarily an MMA fan, because he's a great person to follow too for CEOs, leaders, for fans, because you never have to guess where Dana White stands. He isn't there to just make friends with everybody. He's there to listen, to respond. He's there to explain what's going on. You often will hear him correct people, things, media, whatever. You also will hear breaking news from him. So before it hits any other channel, he has that value, and he's real as it gets. So that's an entertaining account, I would say. It's kind of there's a discovery process. You think about who your favorite athletes are in general, and then, of course, the next thing is you go and you hope that they're interesting on Twitter, if that's the account or the platform that you tend to use the most to connect with them. And sometimes it's a letdown, and sometimes it's very exciting to even find a new athlete that maybe you didn't always find the most interesting on the court or on the field or in the octagon, but now you are have some access into their lives and into their personalities, and you can become a fan that way. So it's a great differentiating factor for these athletes. And post-athletic career, they have a bridge now to stay, once again, relevant and in the pathways of the nearly billion people that have embraced the platforms.